All right, welcome back to another episode of Life After Corporate, my friends. And if you're new to our show, welcome home. This is where we talk about all the facets of entrepreneurship. And today we are going to continue the conversation about entrepreneurship as a spiritual journey by talking with a new colleague of mine that I recently met. Palveshey is a psychedelic integration coach dedicated to redefining health and wealth through plant medicine by helping high-performing leaders transcend trauma, overcome limiting beliefs, and unlock their full potential. And with a remarkable academic and professional background, she has served as an AI researcher at MIT, a lecturer at Harvard University, and a leader in blockchain and quantum physics education. And after transforming her own life from hardship and addiction to freedom and purpose, Palveshey now guides others on a journey of self-discovery and empowerment through her coaching programs, global talks, and retreats in Jamaica. Welcome to Life After Corporate, Palveshey.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really thrilled for this conversation, and it's not unusual to pop into rooms of entrepreneurs these days and someone mentions plant medicine, and then there are smiles and nods throughout the room. And that's what happened on our very first interaction when we met through a professional network. We're on Zoom, and I don't know if I mentioned it or you probably mentioned it first. And then I said, I'm a fan of plant medicine as well. And I remember Geisha nodding her head as well. And so it's like psychedelics are out of the closet now. And so welcome. We're so open to having this conversation today.
Oh, yes. I'm really glad that this is happening. For me, plant medicines were not necessarily medicines in the beginning. They were introduced to me recreationally, but they quickly became medicinal.
Yeah, and I think that's common for many people. And the journey to your spiritual core, I think, is very unique to every person that I've talked with. So I'd love to hear and have you share your background with our listeners. Like how did you get from Harvard University and managing a crypto hedge fund to now leading psychedelic and spiritual retreats with entrepreneurs and maybe others to Jamaica? Would love to hear, how did this unfold for you? What was that moment where there was an inkling of consciousness that, oh, there's something more than I've been open to up until this point in time?
I think it's been a long journey for me, and I'll start a little from the beginning. So I left home when I was pretty young. I was 17, and I had about $200 to my name when I left home. And I spent a lot of that first year sleeping on park benches. And I worked very, very hard and got a scholarship. I ended up going to University of Florida. And because fear had been driving me, I was overachieving. So I triple majored because I just didn't want to be homeless again. And afterwards, instead of really paying attention to what was going on inside, I just continued to do what I knew best, which was school. And so I went and pursued a dual master's. And once I was done with that, that's when I created my crypto hedge fund and the blockchain think tank, which has now been repurposed into a metaverse think tank. And once I was done with that, I was like, I still don't know what I want to do with my life. So back to school it is. And that's when I pursued studies in quantum physics and device information. And by the end of it all, now I had all the accolades, all the titles, food in my belly, roof over my head, money in the bank account. And I felt more depressed than when I began. And when I went to go see a therapist about this, they prescribed me Adderall, which is an ADHD medication, along with Zoloft, which is an antidepressant. And it didn't help. It led me to attempt to take my own life. And I was only 28 at the time. I told myself, or well, a little voice inside said, all right, give yourself 2 more years. And if you really can't find happiness, then just call it quits. And so I sold my house, I quit my job, I moved to a new city, and a friend of mine had given me plant medicine, mushrooms in particular, as a going away gift. And I tried them recreationally when I was much younger, and I reached for them as an escape. And that's just not what happened. I spent 5 hours just crying on the couch, realizing the role I played in my own suffering. And from that experience, what came out of that was understanding that I needed to sit alone with my thoughts more often. And this sparked a 2-year journey of meditating 4 to 8 hours every day. And it changed me completely. So
Yeah.
that's the short
I
of
mean,
it.
there are stories like this with others. Byron Katie comes to mind, who after years of depression, came to the realization one day, when I believe my thoughts, I suffer. And when I don't believe my thoughts, I don't suffer. I came to entrepreneurship through a meditation cushion, through 10 days of silent meditation of hours and hours a day, through that practice as well. And silence is underrated in general in our society, and so many insights are available once you start to go inward. And this hustle culture that we've kind of all unconsciously, or maybe it was our parents that bought into, the whole industrial age of do, study, study, study. It's so interesting that you went through this journey of study and wanting to learn more, learn more, learn more. And how did this psilocybin experience integrate it all for you? And was that an integration point once you were able to, let go of the emotion, or get in touch and experience the emotion maybe for the very first time? What
Well,
happened
I
after
think
that?
so. One of the first meditations that I partook in, it was no particular style. There was no one guiding me. I just sat down and focused on my breath, because my partner noticed that when I inhale, I don't exhale. And if you notice, a lot of us do this, especially when we're trying to focus on something, which is completely counterintuitive because the brain needs oxygen for focus. And so I just sat there focusing on my breath. And what I noticed were all these task oriented thoughts. And in between these task oriented thoughts was this entire dialogue around how I wasn't safe, and these old memories that were definitely not serving me, but they were fueling an entire story and around an identity that I'd created, which was a victim identity. Like, woe
Mm-hmm.
is me, everything wrong is happening to me. Why is this happening to me? And when I started to question myself, and I love that you brought up Byron Katie, because one of her, if you've read her book, The Work, the first question is it true?
That's
And
right.
how do you know it's true? And the thing is, no, we don't know a lot of our beliefs are true, because part of what happens is that a baby comes into this world, and we're like, oh, beautiful, amazing consciousness, congratulations. And sometime, somewhere around 2, 3 years old, that baby might start grabbing things for fine motor skills. And maybe one day it touches something you don't want it to touch. And the parent immediately says, no, don't do that. I think that's the first point at which the subconscious mind starts to believe, oh, my parents' love is conditional. So I will give up who I am in order for their love and safety. And that starts to bleed into all of our relationships as we grow older. So in this way, I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am. And the only way to get out of that illusion is to, yes, sit in silence and really pay attention to what voices are in our echo chamber because of our external world, and which voice is actually our own inner guide.
Yeah. And we don't realize this conditioned thinking until we consciously make a decision to understand the conditioned thinking. And it's sort of like, too, the whole corporate world and maybe the educational institutions as well kind of reinforce this
Mm.
conditioned thinking. Like, we get grades. Are we good enough or not? And this leads to that whole victim triangle of victim, martyr, rescuer, leads us to be people pleasers in the corporate world, especially for women in corporate. It's really hard to not play by a double standard. And I know for me, it was the combination of just being really unhappy in my life, being unhappy in my career, being unhappy in my marriage, being unhappy with myself, realizing that I had intentionally put my head in the sand, like not paid attention to any external cues, and just kind of surrendered my happiness to what was someone else's will on the outside. And so what I'm curious is, was that like that for you too? And at what point did you realize that, oh, the key here is I have to get quiet? And then what were the continued realizations? Like, how did that change your life, getting quiet?
Mm. Well, I would assert that it makes complete sense that women in particular tend to fall into people-pleasing tendencies,
Mm-hmm.
especially since there's an innate capacity to be nurturers. So we just want to love, and we just want to care, and we just want to express compassion, especially in ways that we never receive them. And so
Right.
we begin to fall into those people-pleasing tendencies. I think for me, how things really changed were, one, I stopped comparing myself.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that was causing me deep suffering was I had to be the best at everything, in comparison to other people. But what I've come to realize is flowers are pretty, but so are sunsets, and they look nothing alike.
Yeah.
And it really allowed me to start trusting myself, and notice that there is in fact a little voice inside.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I went into this entrepreneurial journey, well, I was an entrepreneur before too, so I had two companies before, but to shift completely from this science STEM background to this what is considered a soft skill, which I think is a pretty hard skill to learn.
It's a hard soft skill for sure.
Yeah, it's a hard soft skill. Many people told me, your coaches don't make it. Coaches don't make it. You've never been good with people before. What makes you think you'll be good with people now? And I refuse to believe that. I refuse to believe that this is who I am and that's it. No, we're malleable. And really, the only belief that you need is I'm capable of anything in order to remain malleable. And so that, I think, really changed my life. And what I learned about myself along the way was I love listening to people's stories. I love it. It's the way that I connect. If we're at a cocktail bar, I would rather talk about all of your childhood traumas than the weather.
Yeah. Well, it's what connects us. It's what makes us
Yeah.
human. And storytelling is ancient, right?
Yes.
So that's how we've conveyed information for millions of years,
Yes.
from the very ancient civilizations. So I'm curious about how all of these different facets of your personality and your interests and your intellect have come together to create your business now and who you are in your business. So before we hit record, we were talking about quantum physics. And so you've got the quantum physics aspect, you've got your personal experience and personal trauma, you have the plant medicine. Like, how does all of this work together to create the business and experience that you give to clients today? I
Okay.
know that's a
So,
big question.
and I'll break it down into three parts. So, part of how my background, in particular, my own personal background, informs how I show up in the world today is I've gained an incredible amount of compassion for people. I think forgiveness is something that is underrated. Many of us don't forgive, and more often than not, it's because we haven't forgiven ourselves. So I have a pretty high tolerance for lies, for deception, for any of that, because I realize that really underneath all of that is just someone who's scared and has never really felt safe before. So that definitely shows up in my work. It's part and it's necessary, especially if we're going to go into all of the dark areas and explore them curiously without judgment. That, all right, let's lay it out on the table. I think my background in quantum physics has helped in that I think quantum physics is a study of nature and consciousness itself. And as I was sharing before, the double slit experiment, which ultimately revealed that observing behavior changes behavior, for me was instrumental in my journey. It helped me realize that it's not just about observing external behavior. It's that when we begin to observe our internal behavior, that's actually the first step towards change. And lastly, I would say that that plant medicines in particular have helped in that. So the way psychedelics work is imagine a hill with snow and you're taking sleds down that hill. Those sleds create grooves. Over time, certain grooves become deeper than others. These are your habit formations or your addictions or the part of you that you think is you. What psychedelics or plant medicines do is they lay down a whole new layer of snow and allow you the chance to recreate new grooves on purpose with purpose. And so when we're exploring all the dark areas and we realize observing behavior is the first step towards changing behavior, then plant medicines actually behave as a tool to be able to intentionally change ourselves. So the way I describe my work with clients when they're coming in is imagine your mind is a house and you just hired me to be your interior designer. And so, but before we start to redesign everything, we have to take inventory of what's there, what you want to keep and what you want to let go of. That's the first step. Then we start taking things out. That's the plant medicine part. And afterwards, we then redesign the whole place. That's the consciously changing yourself part.
Yeah, I love that analogy, and it matches one that I hold as well, that most of the time our minds are like hoarders' houses. And there's so much clutter that there's no room for insight or inspiration. And so the first step is to start purging out some of those thoughts and beliefs. And we're not even aware that we're waking up with the same patterns of thinking and acting every single day. It's almost like you're replaying the same tape or same record over and over and over again without an ounce of consciousness coming into the day. And what that does is repeat the same feelings, the same thoughts, the same behaviors, and the same results. And in a way, your personality starts to create your future. And without that pause, without that observation, there is no opportunity to change. And, why are people so afraid of it?
Because I think we believe we are our thoughts and our feelings. It becomes our identity and the ego holds on to it. So the ego starts to feel like it's dying if you begin to let go, and it's a hard process. It's a difficult process to constantly catch yourself being a shitty person at times.
Yeah.
And to be like, oh, maybe I should change my ways.
Yeah. And just, everything you want is on the other side of a better thought or a different thought.
Yes.
Right. So
Yes.
everything you want is on the other side of another thought or another belief. And so what psychedelics do, or plant medicine, is you said, lay down new snow. It's, to kind of open up new pathways to new ways of thinking, new ways of being. So let's talk about the journey experience that you and your partner offer in Jamaica versus a microdosing experience. So, psychedelics are not new. My ex-husband was a psychedelics researcher, so it's been in my life for decades of understanding and knowing In technology in Silicon Valley, people have been macrodosing and microdosing. It's well known in the entrepreneurial world. So if someone is curious about, let's unearth some of this organic material with some organic material that will help us, see our lives and see our thinking in a different way. What is the best way for them to get started? Or is there a best way? Or what are the choices for getting started?
I'm not sure if there's a right or wrong way. I do believe that we are capable of guiding ourselves. Now, if you have an experienced guide with integrity, of course, that was always a great option. Now, so I'll go over the differences, and then I suppose you all can decide which option is best for you. So microdosing, I think, has incredible possibilities. So from anywhere from tapping into creativity and joy to especially when you're getting off of antidepressants. The withdrawals of those medications are harsh. And a lot of people don't know how to get off of them because you feel like a zombie for, in my experience, a minimum of 9 months. Uh, and microdosing can be very helpful in that process, that when you're experiencing depression, what these antidepressants do is they turn off the emotions. They turn off all of the emotions and all of the feelings. But what microdosing does is it helps you cultivate just enough peace and joy and awareness to look at the root cause of that discomfort. That can be usually individuals use that more long term as like a protocol. Whereas macrodoses, I've found usually only take 1 or 2 doses to really get to the root cause and start making changes. Now, a microdose is considered somewhere around 0.5 or less, 0.5 grams or less. And a macrodose would be considered something more than 1 gram.
Mm-hmm. And these are, in this day and age, still illegal substances, but widely used. So what are some of the important things for people to consider if this is a path that they want to go down? We talked about, the importance of having a good guide or someone that you trust who can guide you along the journey. How did you and your partner get into hosting these journeys in Jamaica?
So one of the things that I realized, I shared my journey with a friend, and that friend was like, "I feel like I need to do this. Will you trip step me?" And I was like, "Sure." And so much came up for him that we discussed it for weeks afterwards, and it helped him so much. He started talking about it in his therapy sessions. And turns out his therapist had been taking antidepressants for over 2 decades. So the therapist came to see me and we did a ceremony, and that helped so much. He started referring all of his clients. But what I found was many people were coming in thinking, oh, I'm going to take magic mushrooms and all my problems are magically going to be solved. And that's just not what happens. These medicines reveal all the dark areas that you've been avoiding, and then they assign you the homework, but you still have to go home and do the work. So what I did was I expanded out into a 12-week program where we do a mindset assessment in the beginning. This is not a diagnosis. This is just looking at the filters that you've created in life and how those filters shape the way you show up and how those filters change when you get hit with a stressor. Based off of this, then we would spend 6 weeks looking at limiting beliefs, any traumatic experiences that you might have experienced, and really any of the identities that your mind and ego are colluding to create. Then we would do the psilocybin ceremony, which is 5 hours. We would use the same protocol that Johns Hopkins created for their psilocybin therapy sessions. And then 6 more weeks of rewiring limiting beliefs, looking at intention, purpose, and ultimately the legacy you want to leave behind. Because this went so well, we started to expand out into group experiences. But because of the legalities, we had to make sure that all of this took place in decriminalized areas or legalized areas.
Mm-hmm.
And so we created group experiences with 3 weeks of prep, a 6-day retreat in Jamaica where it's legal to host these retreats, as well as 3 weeks of integration. And with these experiences or these programs, what you get is a community element where you get to connect with other individuals who are going through the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's so important too on the community piece, simply because if you're experiencing something that's new, it's great to be able to have a common language to speak with others about it as well. You know,
Yes.
it's super important. What are some of the changes that you've witnessed? We've talked about some of your changes. I know that you also have picked up art. You have an art form of expression as well. When did that start to emerge? And what are some of the transformations that you've seen in some of your clients who have gone on these 12-week programs with you?
Well, yes, painting was introduced to me long before psychedelics were introduced to me.
Okay.
I do think plant medicines have definitely informed a lot of my painting style. For me in particular, plant medicines have opened up a channel for writing. So creativity comes out in unexpected ways. And for me, that was writing. Um, some of the changes that I've seen have been incredible. I've seen individuals working as CEOs in private equity and hedge funds and leaving their entire life behind to go live in the woods. I've also seen a lot of physical healing, which has been just incredibly magical to watch because that was not even in my purview of potential outcomes, where I had one individual who had ulcers all down her esophagus for years. And within one psilocybin ceremony, they were all gone. And we have the imaging to show the before and after.
Yeah.
Um, we also had a professional athlete who had a severe neck injury that ended his career, who came in to one of our Jamaica retreats, and he had a spirit come to him and say, look what I can do, and took a huge syringe and pulled out all the pain from his neck. And now that same injury is no longer an injury and he's able to walk and move again. So I think we are still trying to understand exactly what the impact of these medicines are, because they're not just mental and emotional, they're physical as well. And what we're realizing is it's all connected.
Yeah. And my perspective is it's all connected in dimensions of consciousness that can be accessed through many different channels. And, plant medicine being one of them. Also, fifth dimensional consciousness meditation can also elevate the perspective of the senses. There's a lot of research by Dr. Joe Dispenza on how energy is healing. Similar stories as you just described, where whether it's a spirit or entity or some other support system is arriving to help heal the body. And I've been studying with a shaman, studying crystal healing with a shaman. And it's just amazing, so many levels of healing and understanding that are available to us. And yet we're stuck in 3D consciousness. If I can see it, feel it, touch it, hear it, then it exists. And if I can't, then it doesn't exist. And maybe it's not even possible. So in this series of discussions with spiritual healers or people who are on a spiritual path, my goal for you, the listener, is to really understand that we're entering this era where people are expanding their consciousness and opening up to new possibilities, that there's more that exists in the world than our 3D matter. And while we've touched on one iota of this journey, this understanding, this consciousness, there are so many other facets and ways to get there. And I think it's a combination of what works for different people. For me, it started with Vipassana meditation a long time ago, which more recently led to a retreat with Dr. Joe, which led to microdosing, which led to my curiosity about crystals, which are ancient pieces of earth that have consciousness and intelligence with them as well. And so when you're along for this journey, it's like you're along for the journey, no matter where it takes you.
Yes. And I would just add that one way to begin to transform out of this or transcend out of this 3D consciousness is to slowly but surely remove all the judgments that we have about life and reality and ourselves and the past and the future, which in itself is a judgment because time is only now. But as when we begin to diminish those judgments and they begin to fall away, that's when we really get a chance to transcend beyond just the 3D.
Yeah. And so becoming aware of the judgments, becoming a non-judgmental observer, as my friend Tracy Litt would say. And Byron Katie is also a great way to start because it's so simple.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
recognize, understand your thoughts. Is it true? Can I be sure it's true? What happens to me when I believe that thought? Who would I be if I never had that thought? What would that feel
Yeah.
like? What would I be doing? And then the most empowering thing is turning it around to the opposite, which is equally, if not more true. So my
Yes.
friends, our minds are always lying to us. Nothing, don't believe anything you think, especially as you're creating this new identity from corporate employee to entrepreneur. It will kick up all your stuff. It will, you might
Oh,
label
yes.
it as imposter syndrome, but it's really stinking thinking. It's judgment. It's all of those things that you don't need, that you can let go of with the power of choice. And there's many teachers and healers and guides available to you. Palveshey is one of them. And if people are curious to learn more about your 12-week program or your journeys in Jamaica, how did they get in touch with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn if you want to find any of my writings or sign up for my newsletter there. And if you want to learn more about the retreats, you can go to alternativecoachingmethods.com.
Perfect. And we'll put all of that in the show notes. Palveshey, thank you for sharing your wisdom with our listeners today.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for now, my friends. Entrepreneurship is a spiritual journey, should you choose to take it. It is one of the most rewarding paths to understanding how your mind works and perhaps choosing a different path to consciousness. And so we'll be sharing more about all the different avenues and available to you with future guests. And we appreciate you joining us today. If you liked this show, please rate and review our podcast. It means the world to us. We're one of the top 2.5% of all podcasts globally, and we thank you for that. That's it for now, my friends. We'll see you next time.